being a reasonable human being, I was always brought up to believe that what feminism really meant was choice, was that women who were feminists believed that other women should have the freedom to do whatever they wanted to. They could choose to be a lumberjack if they wanted, they could choose to be a ballet dancer if they wanted, all without regard to what men, or indeed women, thought. They could live their own lives in happiness, doing what they wanted and pursuing what made them fulfilled. But apparently that's wrong. Feminism is apparently not about choice, but really it needs to be. Stunningly, I'm not actually blocked by feminist frequency, or at least I wasn't on my phone the last I checked, and it's thanks to them that I found this particular article. I'm not particularly surprised that we're hearing feminist frequency pimp out this kind of tired, ridiculous nonsense. It's something that we've heard Anita Sarkeesian say plural times before, that feminism is a class-based thing, it's a Marxist thing, that women choosing to do things that make them happy is betraying other women and they owe it to their sisters and blah blah blah. Anyway, I wasn't that surprised to see this, but I think it's an interesting example of what feminism has become. And it's these people who are betraying what the old feminists fought for. Let's jump right in, shall we? Feminism is back in fashion. As the push to claim the F word has intensified, public figures, corporations, and much of the mainstream media have propelled a largely unchallenging version of feminism into the popular consciousness. It is a feminism that never mentions women's liberation, instead opting for a celebration of choice. And we run into our first problems. Firstly, why does feminism have to be challenging? Seriously, why does it? Why can't it just be asking for equality in the law and in society? Why does it have to be something that you require a PhD to understand? Secondly, why is women's liberation something that we particularly need to talk about? Why is this something that you seem to be suggesting reduces your feminist credibility? Women are not subjugated, at least not in the West, and that's where this is talking about. Why is women's liberation something that needs to be bandied about today? It was damn near hyperbolic back in the 70s. Today, to suggest that women are not already sufficiently liberated is ludicrous to the extreme. The things that feminists are campaigning against nowadays are cultural, not legal. Women are liberated. They may not be treated entirely equally all the time, but they are under the law. They are liberated under the law. We do not need to talk about women's liberation anymore. Read almost any online debate about feminism, and the comments will soon devolve into a debate about choice. It doesn't seem to matter what the topic is, people are quick to reframe the issue as one of women's empowerment and right to choose. This provides a neat diversion from talking about the larger power structures and social norms that restrict women in many different ways, all around the world. Okay, here's the problem with this. All of this restricting that you're talking about, all of the power structures that you're talking about and how they disadvantage women. What we're talking about is these things preventing women making their own choices about their own lives. That's why choice is relevant here. If a woman chooses to wear a hijab, that is not something locking her in bondage to some terrible male-centric regime. That's something that she's chosen to do because she feels that that best demonstrates her faith, and that's entirely up to her. That's her choice and she's free to make it. This only becomes a problem when all women are forced to do so. That genuinely does become subjugation. That becomes something that we should stop. Choice matters. Intent matters. And that's something that I'm seeing far too much from the regressive left. It's the idea that intent is meaningless, that only end results are meaningless, that a woman choosing to do something traditionally female makes her just as subjugated as an ISIS sex slave somehow. Intent matters. Choice matters. If you have a choice, then you're probably not being subjugated. Slaves don't have choice. Women do have choice. Women are not slaves. It's been a big month for choice feminism in ridiculous inverted commas. In late March, the fashion magazine Empire Vogue launched a My Choice video in India as part of its Vogue Empower campaign, which quite literally reduced women's empowerment to a series of choices. The thing they don't realise here is that women's empowerment is a series of choices. It's the series of choices they make throughout their whole lives, from when they're born, as they grow up and live lives as human beings, finding education and opportunities and jobs that they like, and they do that by making their own choices. That's what women's empowerment means. It means that they are empowered enough to have those choices and make them for themselves. The video went viral, and as the India-based reporter Gunjit Shah noticed, the hypocrisy of an industry that is based on fetishising, objectifying and reinforcing sexist standards of beauty in women is supposedly promoting feminism went largely unremarked. The thing is that that's a really facile interpretation of things. It's really black and white thinking off the basis of things are sexist or they are not, and if things are sexist they cannot be feminists. And that's just stupid. Things can be sexist in some ways, or potentially sexist in some ways, and empowering in others. There's very few things in the world that are simply and only empowering and nothing else. Some women find dressing provocatively to be empowering, some women don't. Some people find motherhood to be empowering, others don't. This is not as simple as black and white. This is why we talk about feminism being about choice, or why we should be talking about it being about choice. Because there is no black and white. There is no sexist, not sexist divide, and trying to claim that there is ridiculous, frankly. Some things will be empowering to some women, other things will be empowering to others, and each of these women should choose the things that they personally find empowering. What is so hard about this to understand? This liberal brand of quote-unquote choice feminism was then followed to its logical, if absurd, conclusion when a Liberal Democrat candidate in the upcoming UK election tried to explain away footage of him getting a lap dance in a strip club. Apparently it was all part of his feminist mission to assist in empowering women to make legal choices, not to judge the legal choices they make. While I have absolutely no sympathy for a politician being caught in a strip club, he actually has quite a good point here. Strip clubs aren't illegal, strip clubs are fine, and if little girls want to grow up to be a stripper, well, they perhaps need some more parental direction in their lives, but they're absolutely free to do so if that's what they want to do. There's strippers in the world who are incredibly proud, and rightly so, of what they do. They make a good living from it, and they are happy being an object for men for money. You know, this is a business transaction. They have an asset that men want, and men will pay to get it. His argument is that it's feminist for women to have the choice to do that no man can tell them not to. And he's right. When we talk about societal standards that discriminate against women, we're talking exactly about this. We're talking about societal standards created majoritively by women that say that sex workers of any description are bad people and we shouldn't allow them to ply their trade. Men are absolutely not the people creating those standards at all. Prostitutes and strippers and all manner of people in between, these are people who make their money exclusively from men. Men quite like them. Perhaps not every man likes them, but they are mainstream enough that we don't bat an eye at a strip club. The idea of going to a strip club for your stag do is well entrenched in our culture. It's not men who think that these women should be ashamed of themselves. It is women who think these women should be ashamed of themselves, and it is women who think they can tell them what to do. And that's wrong, because the whole point is here that women are exactly like men, they have agency like men, they can choose to follow the career path of their choice. Even Playboy has recently decided to weigh in on the finer points of feminist theory and have come out in favour of a woman's right to be subjected to the pornographic gaze, which, conveniently, fits in very nicely with their own business plan, of course. Except Playboy's right. They genuinely are. No one should ever be compelled to be photographed naked. But if they choose to, and that's what they want to do, and they feel that it expresses their sexuality, or even if it just pays the bills and they're not averse to doing so, if they want to do that, if they freely choose to do that, there's no problem. The pornographic gaze, or the male gaze, as this author is one word away from saying, is not overtly harmful. It doesn't hurt you just by existing. Being in pornography does not make you less of a person. It doesn't steal part of your soul or anything. It's just some photographs. So if it's what you wanted to do, and it hasn't hurt anyone, and it hasn't, hurt you in any way, and society deems that it's legal for you to do it, why is this a problem? It is incidents like these, as well as hackneyed arguments about whether Beyoncé is a feminist or whether male politicians should wear "this is what a feminist looks like" t-shirts, available now made in a sweatshop in Bangladesh, that inspired a new collection of feminist writing, Freedom Fallacy, The Limits of Liberal Feminism. That is an arresting title. In fact, I would say that that is a criminal offence of a title. In the book, which I co-edited, shockingly enough, since you're talking about it, 20 of us take on different topics that have become part of the choice feminism landscape, from pornography and prostitution to female genital mutilation, from women's magazines and marriage to sexual violence. While coming from a range of different perspectives, we all critique the notion that choice should be the ultimate arbiter of women's freedom. You notice here again that what she's saying essentially is that women's choice should not be the arbiter of women's freedom. If women don't have choice, they don't have freedom. If they do have choice, even if that choice is, reduced in some way, then they do have some measure of freedom. Freedom is choice. On another continuum, the opposite of freedom would be being in prison. And in prison, you have no choice. You cannot leave. Your choice is curtailed. Choice is freedom, you idiots. Many of us argue that the rise of this pop feminism is actually more insidious than poking fun at the inane end of the "I choose my choice" spectrum might suggest. First of all, the choice arguments are fundamentally flawed because they assume a level of unmitigated freedom for women that simply doesn't exist. Yes, we make choices, but these are shaped and constrained by the unequal conditions in which we live. It would only make sense to uncritically celebrate choice in a post-patriarchal world. And this is bullshit. This is straight up bullshit. Her argument is essentially that because you live in a world with culture of any description, your choices and aspirations are not your choice, and she is full of shit. Our culture and our society sets the boundaries of what we can aspire to, but it doesn't replace our free will. The argument that women, and anyone in fact, lacks agency is ridiculous on the face of it. In today's world, women are just as free as men to choose. We live in the same cultural landscape. What she is saying is not just that women don't have choice, it's that no one has choice. And while perhaps that might be a reasonable philosophical argument to make, she's not actually making it. She doesn't have the courage of her convictions. She's only saying that women don't have choice because she seems to believe that women are incapable of seeing past the end of a television programme to find their own dreams. If she believes that, she is not a feminist. She is a sexist. She believes that women are not really people. Second, the idea that more choices automatically equate to more freedom is a falsehood. This is essentially just selling neoliberalism with a feminist twist. Yes, women can now work or stay at home if they have children, for example, but this choice is fairly hollow when child rearing continues to be construed as women's work. There is insufficient state support for childcare, and childless women are decried as selfish. She forgets, of course, that child rearing is optional. No one will force you to raise a child unless you want to, and you really shouldn't care what other people think of you. If they think by not having children you're selfish, then fuck them, they don't know you. Again, this is something whereby feminism equates people feeling things to things being true. Why should some random other person's opinion of you as selfish for not having children somehow be something that matters to you. This has no societal power over you. This is just them thinking a thing in the same way that I can think I am a loaf of bread. It has no bearing on reality, it has no bearing on other people, it has no bearing on fucking anything. It is meaningless, it is a thought floating around in someone else's head, and it says more about them than about me. Third, the focus on women's choices as the be-all and end-all of feminism has resulted in a perverse kind of victim blaming, of course, and a distraction from the real problems women still face. If you're not happy with the way things are, don't blame misogyny and sexism, the pay gap, entrenched gender roles, women's lack of representation on boards and in parliament, or an epidemic of violence against women. Blame yourself. You obviously made the wrong choice. Thing is, despite her sarcastic tone, she's actually kind of right, and that's very ironic. You notice the way that she frames it here, as if to say you should be blaming misogyny and sexism and the pay gap and entrenched gender roles and women's lack of representation and blah 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 blah. You should be blaming these things. These things and these things alone are the only reason why you wouldn't succeed as a person. It couldn't be because you studied gender studies. It couldn't be because you spent 10 years of your life raising children instead of focusing on your family. These were choices that you made. No one made you make them. Something that's just occurred to me. How can feminists say that this kind of personal choice is something that is, controlled by the patriarchy and women have no agency and whatever, and yet record numbers of women are signing up to do gender studies? Why? Like, seriously, what is their explanation for this? Certainly it can't be because these women want to, have successful jobs and careers after they leave university, can it? And it's something that's directly opposed to the objectives of the patriarchy, so it's not the patriarchy doing it. So why are women signing up for this? That's just something to think about. Anyway, the point remains that what she's talking about here is the idea that essentially systems define you more as a person than your personal choices do. And she's wrong. She's utterly wrong. Utterly, utterly, utterly wrong. When you cannot, for example, get a job because you trained in something that has no monetary value, yeah, you made the wrong choices. And it's not because of misogyny and sexism that people won't employ you. It's because you spent, 3 years or 5 years or maybe even 8 years obtaining a qualification that trains you to do bugger all. That's why you won't get a job, and that's your choice. You are utterly free to study that if you want. You can do, comic book appreciation if that's your thing, but don't expect that to turn into a job. The world does not owe you that. It is up to you to develop skills the world wants. What she's talking about here is literally entitlement. She thinks that choices should not be important in the world. She thinks that regardless of what decisions you make as a woman, the world still owes you these things. Part of living in a free market is accepting that sometimes you're going to get it wrong. You're going to make a business and it won't work. And sometimes you're going to go to uni and find that actually there's no one who wants those skills. And that sucks, but that's the way of the world. The answer here is not to blame sexism and misogyny. The answer is to start over, learn something new, and try again, like a grown-up. As sociologist Natalie Jovanovski points out in her Freedom Fallacy chapter, got to get the name check in there, it is not surprising this kind of liberal feminism has risen into prominence. In privileging individual choice above all else, it doesn't challenge the status quo. If the status quo allows you to have free choice and free determination over your life, the status quo is not something that needs to be challenged. This is a good case of affairs. This is how the world should work. It doesn't demand significant social change, and it effectively undermines calls for collective action. Basically, it asks nothing of you and delivers nothing in return. Why do things need to demand significant social change? Seriously, why? Why are things that advocate significant social change more desirable than things that do not advocate significant social change? Whether she knows it or not, she's actually stumbled across really the crux of the matter here. Women growing up in this generation are incredibly lucky. They have way more choices than any other women previously than they ever have. Women elsewhere in the world still don't have that level of choice. Women in the West today even have the choice to decry their own form of government. This form of feminism delivers nothing to you because you don't need anything more than you have. Instead of resistance, we now have activists that were once held up as archetypes of women's subordinate status being presented as liberating personal choices. Sexual harassment is being reframed as harmless banter that women can enjoy. Marriage is reconstructed as a pro-feminist love-in. Labiaplasty is seen as a helpful cosmetic enhancement. Pornography is rebranded as sexual emancipation. Objectification is the new empowerment. Except, again, aside from her scathing tone, she's actually right. Because there is no black and white in what's empowering and what's not. In the past, women were either culturally or even legally forced into marriages, and that was a bad thing. But today, where they can choose to marry and choose to marry whoever they want, or to not marry, or do whatever, live in a bisexual three-way relationship, whatever, that's up to them, and they can do it if they want. And those who do choose to get married see marriage as a sign of their emancipation because they chose to do it. It is not the institution of marriage that is sexist, it is how people used the institution of marriage that was sexist. Women in the workplace have embraced the idea that they are whole human beings who are not such wilting flowers who will fall over when someone makes an off-colour joke to them. They might even get involved in it. They might quite like the idea of being flirtatious. And that's up to them. That says nothing about any other woman. That just says something about them. They like it. They like being, paid attention to. Nothing wrong with that. If that's what they want, then they can do it. That doesn't make it harassment. Even labiaplasties are something that women should have if they want them. No one should be forced to have them, but no one is forcing you to have them. If you want them and you think, they make you more aesthetically pleasing as a person, knock yourself out. No one's going to make you, but no one's going to stop you, because that's the liberal dream. That's how things should be. It's not subjugating you if it's something that you chose to do for your own self-esteem. Is it? Do you think that slaves living in Athenian Greece had this kind of choice? Do you think perhaps that slaves, and even the slaves in today's world, wouldn't absolutely love the idea of being subtly controlled by their culture instead of physically controlled by the brutality of their captors? Instead of talking about a vision for a more equal future, we are left with inward-looking, futile discussions about whether or not individual women are bad feminists, or what journalist Sarah Ditton has termed the "can you be a feminist and" game. Although the real issue of women's progress is whether or not we can live up to some fabled feminist ideal, which really does expose the core problem that she has here. You can be a feminist and do anything as long as you were free to make that choice. There is no feminist ideal. The only ideal is one of principle, not of action. It is of principle. If you choose to have a family and raise that family well, and you take pride and enjoyment from that, you are as much of a feminist as someone who is, out protesting at things, writing acerbic articles for websites, etc. You can be a feminist and do everything that you want to do. To be a feminist is simply to support your own freedom. If you have that freedom, you are a feminist. So thorough is the individualization of choice feminism, inverted commas again, that when women criticise particular industries, institutions and social constructs, they are often met with accusations of attacking the women who participate in them. The importance of a structural level analysis has been almost completely lost in the popular understandings of feminism. The reason it's been lost is because it's out of touch Marxist dogma that has no place in the modern world. The only reason that you can analyse structures in the way that she talks about is if you look at the world as classes of people versus other classes of people. The popular branches of feminism are the ones that don't think in Marxist terms. That's why they don't do that. By way of comparison, it would seem quite ludicrous to suggest that by critiquing capitalism, a Marxist was attacking wage labourers. It would similarly seem very odd to suggest that those critiquing Big Pharma hate people who work in the pharmaceutical factories, or that those who question our cultural reliance on fast food have it in for the kids behind the counter at McDonald's. That's a really disingenuous comparison to make, though. In fact, I go so far as to say it's almost literally an apples to oranges comparison. The feminist analysis of these things essentially boils down to, if you participate in this structure, then you are hurting women everywhere. And whether just by being a part of this, you are hurting everyone, and that makes you terrible and you should be stopped. The kid behind the counter at McDonald's has no part in the vast majority of what McDonald's does, and that's recognised by anyone criticising fast food. The issue is not to do with the kid behind the counter, but feminism looks at things systemically. Of course it does. And it argues that women, simply by not objecting to these kind of things, to these structures, they are tacitly giving them consent because of their internalised misogyny. That is the feminist argument. And to suggest that the feminists critiquing these sexist structures aren't critiquing the women who are part of those structures is bullshit. You are doing that. You are exactly doing that because your own logic says that to not fight against that structure is to be as sexist as that structure. You are lying. Ultimately, the promotion of choice and the myth of an already achieved equality have hampered our ability to challenge the very institutions that hold women back. But the fight is not over. Many women are reasserting that feminism is a necessary social movement for the equality and liberation of all women, not just platitudes about choice for some. You notice that she doesn't mention any institutions that hold women back particularly. She just assumes that the reader knows exactly which institutions she's talking about. That's the myth in all of this. The myth is that we've already achieved equality is a myth. The myth that we have further to go somehow, even though no one can suggest how we actually do that, is the problem here. Notice that last sentence as well. Notice platitudes about choices for some. As if the suggestion that all women should have choices somehow doesn't include all women. Now, if she was arguing that that expression, all women should have choices, doesn't include men, and as such, until all men have the same degree of choice, then things are unequal, then I could understand that, but she's not saying that. Her argument here is that the women who argue for choices are not really women because they're not her kind of feminists. Also notice that while she claims that many women are reasserting that feminism is a necessary social movement, she doesn't justify that at all. She doesn't justify that it actually is a necessary social movement. She only says that many women are reasserting it. With those kind of hard facts, it's surprising that feminism isn't doing better for itself. In a free market, the freedom to make choices is all that matters. It's the only freedom that we could ever have. While our culture and the art that surround us shapes our ideas and our aspirations, it does not control them. And to suggest that such things uniquely disenfranchise women and not men is directly sexist. This woman is an idiot. You should not buy her book. You should, if you find a copy, burn it, and failing that, tell anyone who will listen that she is a wanker. I'm the political animal, and culture made me do it.